Hey everyone, this is week 3 Q&A, answering all your questions about student schedules and paraprofessional schedules when you are scheduling across multiple grade levels for both of them. Like, how do we work all of those things? So the first question that I have for us is, can you share your master schedule? And so I was in the Facebook group and I shared a couple different schedules that I've used in the past. Some worked well, some didn't. But if you find one that you really like, I did share all of those out for you. And just to get an idea, I did print a couple of these that you can look at. So this is typically what my summer schedule would look like. It's pretty consistent across the board. Summer school, we all know, is a little bit more casual. So I would just make sure that there was breaks and gym time, and we did cooking one day. Every day they had a snack, so cooking was a part of that snack. And then movement break was also in there. We did art, which was a fun thing that we never really got to do. So there was maybe like a firework craft or something that we were doing along that side. And then this was actually the first year too that I had implemented a student business in ESY. So I had students that would create slushies, we called them. It was basically just like water and fruit. And I think maybe even a little bit of ice just to solidify it a little bit. And it was just that all blended up, and then we sold those for $1 for the students. So we would kind of do in like math, we would kind of work on counting how many orders we had, seeing if we had enough things, if we had to go out and buy stuff. I would go out and buy it because we didn't have community trips. And then on Wednesday we would collect money, and Thursday we would deliver and whatnot. And do all of that. So that was a whole other process too, but that's a little side note tangent. Another schedule that I've used in the past, this was a great year when everything just happened to be scheduled pretty well. Again, it's got the time blocks on the side. And my class periods were 45 minutes each. Anything that was in like gray was something that I couldn't move. So that was a permanent thing in our schedule. So as I was creating this, which I did myself, I had to make sure that, okay, we couldn't change when our PE time was. We couldn't change when our elective time was. We couldn't change when lunch was. We couldn't change when community was. And so that would kind of help too if my related services were coming in to schedule things, that they knew if they were going to push into community, they were required to come with us to community so that they could meet their minutes. So again, this year was a great year and things just happened to work out. You also may notice some of the people have mentioned to me that, oh, well, you don't have a science or social studies in here. So I was required to do math and reading for sure. Current events was when we did our social studies time. But we also used unique learning systems. So reading covered science and social studies flip-flop months. So that was my requirement for that. And then also we had cooking class on Friday, which I did not move on that schedule. And so cooking class was also somehow told that was science. So that was my requirement for my school when I did it. Again, this is in the Facebook group. If you want to make a copy of it, please make sure that if you are taking those files, you are making a copy of them because those are my originals and I do not want to lose them. So in a not so great year, something I did, which I think everybody seemed to find that they loved more, was I had obviously the schedule on the side, and then I ended up having like different types of rotations. So you can see kind of that I had like a teacher rotation for each one, and then individual. Some students needed sensory breaks during that. So this is I left it in there for you just so you can kind of get an idea, but you are welcome to delete any of that and make copies as well. So it was like whole group reading was at a certain time, math stations. So again, eventually I would try to make my reading into stations, but it just never went that way. But again, some things it just worked out better than others. So we literally had math from 8:30 until about 10:15 or so. So that was a long block of time. That was something we were trying out with my class. So again, if you need to kind of do that and condense it a little bit, you totally can. And then the other thing that I added on this one was who was with which person. So as I started to color code, I saw like this was where I was at. And then eventually I could fill in the green and the red of where my staff was. And then I usually put the student's name on the side as well. So the students were up top. So again, that's in the Facebook group that you can make a copy of. And And then I also shared a couple of these student schedules. Here was one that I had a student just like checking off the box. Actually, she earned a star every time she went through. And we counted up her stars at the end of the day. And that was earning a prize for her at the end of the day or when she got home, depending on where she was at in the school year. Something else I did was a special schedule. So if we had community trips or somebody had OT or speech, just to kind of let them know like, hey, it's Wednesday and you have speech today. So this is what we did. And then I just made little Velcro stickers on top of it. You can also use a whiteboard and write on it. And then I also had another student schedule, this one here. This was kind of more of a task analysis strip for you're supposed to do the work bin, then do money and time, and then you get some math containers at the end. So this was the IEP goal work. This was just more reinforcement of skills. And then this one was more like fun at the end, just to kind of remind him of some things that we've been working on. So those are all again in the Facebook group. If you need help finding them, just tag me in something and I can get it for you. So let's go to my next question. What do I schedule in the afternoon when students are fatiguing? So a lot of what I did in the afternoon was more independent living and functional skills. So it was more of hygiene, self-care, self-management. I even did some IEP goal stuff in the afternoon just to take the data to see how that would go. And I also implemented independent work tasks and work boxes. So that became like student jobs and opportunities for them to be working by themselves without somebody like yelling directions at them. So that was always worked really well for me. If it was something like a science or social studies, where maybe I wasn't as excited about it or it wasn't as important, I usually threw that in the afternoon. It also did happen to be that I had to do reading in the afternoon one day. No, every day I lied. So reading in the afternoon literally became sometimes pulling teeth. And then I would just have to kind of balance of like, okay, maybe we'll just do a small group reading today instead of whole group. So that's kind of what we did. And just getting flexible with that. So again, student jobs, independent work, helping around the classroom, maybe finding those opportunities to do maybe some silent reading or shared reading opportunities where it's not all on the students. So yes, I agree. The student fatiguing part is very hard. And I always said by 1:30, 2 o'clock, all my students, it was like the witching hour. Like it was just like things were falling off as we were tired. So a lot more times for breaks, not more times for sensory, that kind of thing. So just keep that in mind as you schedule. Okay, so this was a good question. This kind of goes into the next two questions. If we teach maybe 3 grade levels, this example was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and we want to have the standards, and I get them obviously for a 3-year rotation, is that okay? Can I teach 6th grade 1 year, 7th grade 1 year, 8th grade 1 year? Yes, it is. I know we have to get really flexible when scheduling our students and teaching to the standards. I just would be mindful of making sure that you are building on those skills, because typically 6th grade skills build on 7th grade skills, build on 8th grade skills. So if you can at least take a time to review before you are teaching ahead, because sometimes it just builds on each other. So I'm sure you're doing all of that, but just be mindful that like there might be some prerequisites that they need as a 6th grader before they do 7th grade or 8th grade standards. So again, a lot of them are very similar and very fluid. So yes, you could just kind of have that. But if your administration for whatever reason says like, hey, you need to be teaching 6th grade standards, just put up all 3 standards on the board or whatever you're working on so that they know like you are working on all those skills. Okay. So then this one kind of goes into the next question of, I'm going to specifically quote it. What are some options when you have 3 adults for 3 grade level standards or grade levels? Sorry, 3 adults, 3 grade levels. So I'm assuming 1 for each, and each grade level has inclusion time scheduled throughout the day. And then you have 1 or 2 students who don't go to inclusion. So there isn't anyone to cover those students unless others are held back with your assigned adult, thus non-compliant with the IEP. So this is a big legal question, which I love because I'm also an IEP coach. So I would suggest to take that information down. document everything, document all the times that staff needed to stay back because nobody was with them. I'm assuming you are also included in those 3 adults of the room. So maybe there's 2 paraprofessionals and yourself. So you have to push out into the inclusion time sometimes at the same time. But again, documenting all of that, where the student is or is not, or who needs to stay back, whose service minutes were not being met, because if it's non-compliant with the IEP and you bring that to an advocate, a family, an administrator, they should say, we need to fix this. This something needs to change. We need to find another staff who can support this. So document. That's all I can say. And just keep bringing this up that this is a concern and not being met. So, but that is huge when scheduling as well, is making sure that there's enough staff. All right. Scheduling student lunches and specials together when low staffing. Yes. So this one's super hard, especially if it is like a half lunch, half special, or half, or like, and just general scheduling. So lunch for staff that I usually try to do, is I tried to schedule between 10:45 to 1. Maybe 1:30 is like the absolute latest that I would go. If you can find that strategic time to overlap, sometimes I might say, okay, you can start your lunch at 11, you get a half hour, but I'm going to send somebody else at 11:20, so that there's a 10-minute break, like that 2 of them are gone. Which, yes, it's tough if you can't manage that. But that 10-minute time is more like a calming, self-regulating time, where I don't require a lot of staff, or I might do a whole group that we do really well with for that 10 minutes, so that I can just keep it together and then move on. But yes, schedules for lunches, for student lunches and specials. I always told my staff, you are not allowed to go on lunch or your break during student lunches or specials. If we got to a point in the school year, because I worked with middle school, that my students were okay during specials, then yes, I would have staff go take a 15-minute break and come back. But that's typically it. I would just try to make sure that you are being strategic about that. And if you can find those moments to overlap, that'll help save you maybe 10 to 15 minutes of time in the long run, so that they all come back a little bit earlier. And if that's not possible, that's not possible. Just try to back to back to back, one person goes, next person leaves, kind of thing. And then if your student lunch is in there, take that break for that student lunch and then schedule that last person afterwards. So, and then what do you do with your students during staff lunches? This was always a time, I'm looking back at my schedule here, because I would take them typically during math. So yes, I would lose somebody during instruction time. Student lunches, I had all my staff on board typically. And then, yeah, I would lose them again when the students are doing independent work or jobs and hygiene and bathroom, which I know was a hefty duty, but like we just kind of rotated, and it was just like, let's hammer it out. Everybody needs to go to the bathroom, and then students were independently working. And then I usually lost one for reading as well. And so we just kind of managed and got creative. Maybe some centers, but with less staff. So yes, something like that. Or if you can do something where it is like a whole group where the students are all together in one place, that kind of can do more zone defense of when teaching. So I can teach to the front of the class, obviously, and try to manage and support all the students in the front row or the front area. And then I had 1 or 2 staff that would just kind of circle throughout. So hopefully that helps. Okay, what happens when you need paras, but they're being subbed and pulled for subbing, and obviously meeting state requirements, but when you have them, but then they're being pulled, again, document. That's all I can say. And just keep bringing that back to your administrator, like per their IEP, they need to have this support, per their IEP, and they need to have that support. It's legal document. They should know that. Okay, and then the last question we have is, what do we do with constantly changing schedules due to new students coming in? It's a lot. It is. And it totally is. And you have to rework it every single time. I know the beginning of the year, I always say for the first like month and a half, I have to rework my schedule a couple different times. Just because of related services, or things just aren't matching up to where they need to be. Or you're right, we just don't have the staff and there's not enough staff for it. So really, that is something you just got to let go. It's going to be a lot, and you are going to have to change your schedule a couple times. And yes, you think it's perfect and ideal when you um first do it, and you're like, oh, this is the great schedule. My kids are going to love it. You start making all your student schedules, which takes a lot of work and time as well. And then a new student comes in and we have to change things again because of groupings and numbers and staffing. And so that is really a lot. And so um yeah, I would just take some time. Obviously, when you have a new student coming in, getting an idea of what group they'd be a part of, and then trying to slowly change that schedule for your other students. Um, because it is a lot. And unfortunately, that's not something we have control over, is how many students we have. I wish it was, but it can be very hard. So if you have any other questions about scheduling paraprofessionals, scheduling your students across multiple grade levels, I know, document everything. That is really just the key here of like, if my students are not getting supported and therefore going into crisis or needing more support in the classroom and the gen ed teacher can't do that, just document every single thing that you can. I'm not saying every district will be open to that and understanding, but keeping a log of all that information is going to save you in the long run, because we all know we are facing staff shortages right now. And so low staffing is going to happen, and they may come back and say, like, we just don't have people. But is there a way that we can get your social worker to push in for a little bit, and do some strategic planning in that regard? I think that might be helpful. So, okay. Yeah. If you have any other questions, go ahead and comment. And next week we are chatting all about independent work tasks. Due to the holiday, we will be recorded, so that will not be live, but you are welcome to comment any questions you have on independent work. Otherwise, we'll be back next Sunday.